This is the DP Show,
where insanity sounds sane.
And now, the man, the myth, the legend in his own mind, D. Palmer.
Good evening. It's the DP Show, and you'll never guess what. You can't say that D. Palmer doesn't get results. You can't say it because one day after we have a DP Show in which a great majority of it, half of it at the very least, was devoted to the officiating situation in the NFL. Well, guess what happened? They seem to be close to a deal. Sources are telling a variety of news sources that the league and the referees might be very close to a deal. I did misspeak at one point yesterday. I said that the only thing that these officials were looking for was a pension, and the NFL is offering them a 401k situation. They are, in fact, asking that some of these officials be hired on as full-time employees, which actually makes complete and perfect sense. This is a $9 or $10 billion industry. There's no reason for them to be cutting every corner that they have at their disposal. For example, playing any... And the biggest beef that I or anybody like myself has had has been along the lines that these owners or Roger Goodell or whoever has been now willing to jeopardize the credibility and integrity of so many of these different football games. I mean, this is only 3 games, but you could also make the case this is essentially 20% of the season, or very close to it. I'd have to check my math, but it's very close to it. This is a large portion of the season that has had some pretty big games that have been decided by some pretty bad officiating. So, whether or not this had happened at all, I guess is just something that is for the suits to discuss. I don't know. But the good news for football fans is it looks like this whole thing is about to end. But the question that I now have, we go so far as to fine Bill Belichick $50,000. You may have seen the end game where Bill Belichick, after watching his team get burned repeatedly, I'll say, by questionable calls, just to put it kindly, questionable calls throughout the fourth quarter. And, of course, these are going both ways. There isn't one team in particular that is being torched by these replacement officials, but the Pats wind up losing. And just from you can't script this sort of scenario, and I believe I talked about this yesterday, you got a field goal try that goes over the upright. It goes over the upright. Now Michaels, I'm certain I said this yesterday. Al Michaels says, look, those go all the way out in outer space and on into infinity. All it's got to do is cross over them, or inside of them, I beg your pardon. But the question then that is given to the rest of us is, do you trust those two bozos that are standing underneath the crossbar to gauge whether or not that did, in fact, go inside the upright? And from my vantage point, dude, I just don't think it did. I don't know that, though. The one thing I know for certain is that I don't trust the two bozos standing underneath the upright to make that call. And I think that we could see with Bill Belichick is that he didn't believe it either. And it was a pretty... you could easily forgive somebody for making the decision that Belichick did to grab the referee and say something to him, probably like, holy cow, I can't believe somebody is being paid to be as bad at something as you are, and then let him run off. Just a friendly suggestion. It checks that maybe he ought to make an effort to get a little bit better at what he does. I don't know if that's what he said, but I can promise you that I would probably have started my conversation with that official along those lines if I were, in fact, Bill Belichick. The question I have for the NFL is, how can you pretend that everybody should be held to the same standard as if you were still using the good referees? Right? Why can you not provide the coaches with a little bit of leeway if you're going to make this case that there is some sort of righteous cause for you to go about using these horrible, horrible, horrible officials? Or when these horrible, horrible, horrible officials, anybody who's ever watched a football game knew that these guys were just horrible, horrible, horrible officials. Why can't you go ahead and allow the coaches to express a little bit of frustration, do something that wouldn't result in any sort of criminal activity or even accusation thereof on the streets after this game that they just spent 1 week of their life preparing for. And remember, they only get 16 of these in most cases a season that count. This is a big part of the year for these guys, and it was just botched, potentially, by some crusade that's undertaken by Roger Goodell. Why can't they express themselves even just a little bit if the league is going to insist on using these clowns to potentially ruin these football games? I think that $50,000 is a little bit outrageous. Kyle Shanahan also was fined. I don't know what went into that one, but I'm guessing it's probably something that he had said after a game. And it just brings to another point. Why is the league going so far as to trying to make sure that coaches on the sideline are not going to intimidate these horrible, horrible officials? And at one point, the Baltimore Ravens sideline was given an unsportsmanlike flag because their head coach, whose name has just evaded me, oh, somebody help me. Well, their head coach was trying to get one of the referees' attention so he could ask for an explanation on one of their horrible, horrible, horrible calls, and then tried to make the case that he was trying to call a timeout. They said, yeah, right, and they gave him a 15-yard flag, and Chris Collinsworth made the point that the league doesn't want you trying to intimidate these officials. The coaches don't want the league ruining football games by using these officials. And if they have repeated cases of apparent coaches seemingly trying to intimidate these officials, why wouldn't they just go get the good officials? Why were they so willing to ruin the product that they were putting out there? And the reason why I'm going on like this again, even though, heaven help us if there isn't a deal that's going to be coming here shortly. But let's just hope that there is. The reason I'm going on like this is we, the consumers, were slowly being driven into this scenario where we were going to have to make a call. Either we were going to continue to pretend that we were watching real football with these horrible, horrible, horrible officials, or we were going to have to start voting with our feet, so to speak, and trying to find out if there's anything else that's good on TV on Sunday. I got an idea that the answer to that question is no. Having a general idea about what is on TV every other day, go back and listen to the show that we had on there yesterday. Big Brother is something that passes as acceptable TV on any day of the week. That's not exactly highbrow viewing. And what I was about to start suggesting, if it looked like the NFL was not going to try to use, especially those last two games, as motivation to go broker a deal, is that it was going to be the fans' responsibility to make it known, not with a phone call, not with 70,000 voice messages that the league said it had after the Monday night game on Tuesday, but by shutting off the TV and telling the NFL that you will come back and watch these games when you're more than a little bit certain that you're not going to tune in and watch professional wrestling. Right? I'm pretty sure we were just 1 week away from somebody hopping off the opposing sideline with a steel chair and cracking a quarterback across the back and then hooting at the fans while they showered booze and batteries down upon him. This is what this was starting to look like. This was looking like street ball. It was like, why are you guys even out there? You're just getting in the way. And the league was perfectly content taking everybody's money. Just another sidebar here. Remember the debate that we have every summer about how these guys charge the consumers full price to go watch preseason football. About preseason football, when almost every other case this is with actual officials. People make the argument that it is unfair to be charged full price to watch preseason football. We're watching a farce. People are paying top dollar to go watch a farce. People are paying for pay-per-view programs to watch this farce. And the league was saying, that's right, puppets. Send me your credit card information. I'm going to continue to do this, and you are going to like it. It was a sham. And thankfully, after disaster struck, and coaches were fined tens of thousands of dollars, and one potential Super Bowl contender was really jobbed on the road in a nationally televised game, it looks like they've finally been motivated to do the right thing. Now, college football, on the other hand, still not so much, because there is an ongoing farce, and this has been one, ever since, for some reason, Division I football realized that it's sitting on a cash cow. I don't know what is going on there. But if you've been living under a rock and are a sports fan, and this is your first emergence, the NCAA has deemed that they were going to step away from the BCS in a couple of years, and they're going to have a 4-team playoff. Well, word is starting to leak out that they are already considering expanding this out to an 8-team playoff. This is still ridiculous. And I'm going to go back 2 years ago when Pac-12 commissioner, then Pac-10 commissioner Larry Scott, started making the move towards super conferences. And people started asking him, what's the deal? Why are you going to try to ruin a good thing? He essentially said, because this is a farce. This is absolutely ridiculous that the Pac-12 in Southern California and Stanford and the incredible resources they have, and even teams like Arizona and Arizona State and the incredible resources that they have relative to the smaller schools, like New Mexico, to give you a regional example, have to pretend that the teams in the Pac-12 are on any sort of equal footing as is New Mexico, to give you a regional example. Because the Pac-12's resources are so much more massive than anything that any of these smaller, even Division 1A, or whatever we're calling them, football bowl subdivision resources are in the MAC or the WAC or even the Mountain West or something like that. Larry Scott was saying we should just form these super conferences as part of a way that was ultimately going to have everybody who's playing giant football to form yet another realm within the NCAA, or what I was really hoping for, to go ahead and tell the NCAA to pound sand, good luck trying to market BYU versus Butler every spring in the Final Four, because we're going to go off and do stuff that makes sense. One of the things that makes sense, if we aren't going to do the super conferences and we aren't going to go off and form legitimate giant football leagues, is to make these conferences mean something. And the one thing that we learned last year when LSU lost to a team that it should have never been put on the same field with, Alabama, in the BCS championship game, was that the conferences mean absolutely nothing. The divisions within the conferences mean absolutely nothing, because the powers that be, I don't know who to refer to here, once they deem something, ESPN, that one conference is so much better, the SEC, which can be seen regularly on ESPN because of a $1 billion TV deal, but now I'm talking conspiracy kookery, but once they have their minds made up that this is the case, then everything else can just get out of their way. So because of that, because of the outcry there, again, good job consumers, but because of that, we get this 4-team playoff where you have to win your conference, or I don't remember all the ins and outs of it because it's still stupid. Because you have most conferences playing only or 4 non-conference games, and most of them are going to be against these teams that are designated wins from the Mid-American Conference, from the Sun Belt Conference in particular, with the Big Ten and the SEC, and they are these other Division I schools they know that they have no chance of playing for any kind of national championship, but yet they're going to go out there and continue the charade. And my argument has been, just like every other sport division, however you want to put it, there is a tournament that is in play. There is a committee that decides on who is going to participate in that tournament, and then they're going to go out there and they're going to execute the tournament. This argument that you can't play 4 more games is ludicrous, because you have every other school at every other level who has nowhere near the medical or training resources that the big power conferences have. They play an extra 4 games to crown a champion. So why don't we have a 16-team tournament with all 10 champions, conference champions, getting an automatic bid? 6 bids that are going to be then chosen by the committee, and you're going to do this just like every other sport in every other division in the NCAA. The immediate answer is, well, nobody wants to watch the SEC champ pound the Sun Belt. That is absolutely incorrect, because the SEC schools fill their stadiums 4 times a year with the rough equivalent of that matchup. People will pay to watch that, first of all. But second, the reason to do this is because it just makes sense. Either they need to divorce themselves from these smaller conferences and schools, or they need to do something that makes sense. Opening up the tournament to 8 teams does not make sense. And I would go so far as to wager that the reason why the presidents haven't signed on to a concept like this is because they understand that eventually they're going to get their 16-team tournament, And 11 or 12 or 13 or 14 or dare I say 15 of these teams are going to come from the power conferences, and they're just holding out for all of the money that they can get their hands on. Now, if that's enough for you, college football fans, I will shut up right now. But that still doesn't make any sense. If that is the case, then what we need to do is just go ahead and divorce, like I've been saying here. In the meantime, why are you spending one bit of your time, unless you just madly love football, watching this ridiculous stuff? Right? If you just love watching football, hey, get in on it. I'm not going to get in your way. But if you're thinking that you're supporting any sort of championship or championship caliber football, dude, it's not happening. And the only way that we're going to make any kind of change, what we're seeing with the NFL, is if you just turn off the TV. Now, I'm not advocating that. I love watching, especially the Pac-12, watching the U of A, even watching the ASU, right? It's good fun. I'm part of the problem here. What I'm preaching here is just basic economics. If you want to try to make something better, you have to stop providing these people with the incentive to abuse you, and that's what's been happening. That's what happened last year with the BCS champions, and that's what happened last week with these ridiculous NFL officials. You got to stop giving it to them. I really hope that tomorrow we all wake up. Then there's not going to be anything to talk about along these lines. Of course, the stupid college football types are just now realizing that, for example, the Big Ten isn't any good. It's taken Northwestern being one of a couple of unbeaten teams in that league. Oh my gosh, these guys might not be any good. They haven't been any good for 10 years, but here I go getting myself all riled up in another direction. When we come back on the DP Show, we're going to talk about what is going on exactly with this debt. I've been referencing it before. We're going to talk about it next on iTalk 106.7.